Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Welcome to Chapter 2, the legal system. This should be used as a supplement to reading the text. Make sure that you go through the textbook. There's a lot of great information in here. There's 38 slides, so I have to go pretty quickly in order to get through all of them. And I know you've probably seen some other resources or videos on this already, so I'm not going to bore you with repeating things, but from the perspective of understanding what we have to go through in the U.S. in regards to our legal processes, this is a great start. So I hope that you get everything out of it that you were looking for, because I definitely did while teaching it. We're not going to look at the learning objectives. Feel free to take a look at that in the, of course, module, though the PowerPoint is located there. Hopefully you have it printed off and are following along. That's my suggestion anytime that you watch these videos. All right, so there's two fundamental processes in the legal system. You have a federal system that's divided between branches of government and, of course, smaller state governments. So there's a federal branch and a smaller state branch. And I'm sure many of you have already are aware of that. And the same could be said on the judicial side of the federal system. There's checks and balances throughout the system. It's designed so no one single branch of government can control the entire government, although that's come into context quite a bit as I do this lecture. There's always competition from the checks and balances side on the Congress or of course, the judiciary, or even the presidential branches. So something that's really interesting as time goes on when some of the challenges come up. And when I mention presidential branch, I mention, it's executive branch, and sometimes I refer to it as the president, but that's always the executive branch of government. Three different branches, right? Legislative, judicial, and executive. The legislative branch does the lawmaking, right? They set the laws, originate legislation. Executive branch is voted in, right? President, cabinet, and advisors. The cabinet's not voted in, but the president, of course, is. And legislative branches as well, Senate and House of Representatives. And then the judicial branch, judges and federal courts. And remember, judges, especially the Supreme Court, sit for a lifetime, right? So when you're appointed, it's a lot of power, right? The president appoints judicial roles on the federal side, and they sit for a lifetime. So it's quite a use of power when you're able to get the amount of judges or judges that you want into power, because they can help that branch move in the right direction. Although it's not really supposed to be that way. They're supposed to interpret the law and interpret the Constitution and function in that regard, but it is quite a bit of power from the executive branch when they're able to submit someone for a lifetime appointment. All right. Here's a really great diagram, right? You have the Constitution, three branches, Congress, of course, 100 members in the Senate, and then 435 in the House. It depends on the population, though, but the Senate, it's two per state, and that's the way the Founding Fathers suggested that it be. And I think the House of Representatives, of course, has changed over time based on our population, but it keeps growing, right? I don't think it's ever decreased. It's something I'd have to research, but it's quite substantive. And they are elected every 2 years, right? And the Senate is quite a bit longer than that. It's actually 6 years. Congress is 2 years. I just had to make sure that I was correct on that. I knew it was up there. I always forget it's 6 years. Judicial branch, really, really interesting. Supreme Court, of course, is the head, and then the Circuit Court of Appeals and District Court on the federal side. The state side is going to be different. Okay, separation, the legal, in the powers of the federal system, right? Lots of different things that you can look at. I'm not going to go through all of this, but there's a lot of different outlines here. And I think this is a good thing to print off if you're ever confused who has the power to do what. But a lot of the things we've already talked about in this diagram here. Same with the federal court structure, right? You have tax courts, you got court of claims, courts of appeals, and circuit court of appeals. A lot of really interesting dynamics in regards to our federal court structure. Just make sure you understand there's a difference on the state and federal side. And of course, on the federal side, the head is the Supreme Court. And you can appeal, of course, things. When you have an issue that doesn't go your way as the plaintiff or the defendant, actually, you can appeal the request on the federal side, and it could potentially go all the way to the Supreme Court. All right, sources of law. You have constitutional law, statutory and regulatory law, and then common law. It's interesting to talk about common law. All right, So read through these. Constitutional law addresses relationship between individuals and the government. Statutory law passed by legislative bodies, right? It makes total sense. And then common law established from court decisions based on precedent. You can go back. Common law has been in place back hundreds of years back, if you think to England and the way they go through their practice of judicial exercises. That it dates back a long time. So it's just based on past court decisions is what you need to know. All right. Classifications of law: you have private or civil, and then you have public. Criminal law is public or right. It can happen on the state or federal level, and then private or civil law: contract issues, property issues, inheritance, family, corporate, or torts. And then all this is going to be addressed, of course, in your textbook. I'm going to go a little bit quicker here. So civil law is concerns between individuals, right, or businesses and government. So most of the time it's like monetary damage things. Civil law results in monetary damages. Includes tort law and contract law. Contract law is a lot of what we see. Here's some components of civil law. I really like this. It really talks about, torts can be non-intentional, malpractice, negligence from a healthcare side. Intentional could be, false imprisonments, defamation of character. You hear about that a lot. Slander and libel, invasion of privacy, fraud, battery, and assault. All right. And in intentional torts, they can result in prison time, right? So don't think that it's just going to be monetary. When you talk about battery and assault, there are things that happen there that can result in sentencing. Tort law: civil injury, wrongful act, can be intentional or unintentional, usually results in harm. It says it's compensated by monetary damages. Tort law can result in prison time. It's not the tort procedure itself. It's usually there's going to be a criminal charge attached to it. So you can have a tort civil claim and a criminal claim at the same time. So a lot of times, and especially with providers that have had issues, maybe they did something intentional to a patient, you'll have a criminal proceeding and then you'll have a civil proceeding after that for monetary reward. So tort law is going to be monetary, although most of the time when you deal with really complex issues that are intentional by nature and result in harm, there's a criminal component attached to it. So keep that in mind. Intentional torts: assault, threat of bodily harm, battery, when actually you do bodily harm, false imprisonment, violations of liberty and result of that, and then defamation of character, right? You hear about that a lot. Fraud, of course, invasion of privacy. Those are two things that are intentional. Unintentional is negligence. Maybe you make a mistake that you didn't intend to do. A reasonable person wouldn't do that. It happens quite a bit on the healthcare side of things. It's a lot to do with carelessness. Mistakes happen, so it's not exercising ordinary standard of care. That's why we have so many different elements within our healthcare system to prevent those issues, or the goal is to prevent issues like negligence, because mistakes do happen. Contract law addresses a breach in a binding agreement between two parties. If you break a contract, of course, that's going to be a civil proceeding. There's an express contract, an implied contract. Agreement shown through signs, interaction, silence. Implied contract. It's kind of interesting. So you have to convince the judge if there's an implied contract. So maybe there's not a written agreement, but it's kind of common knowledge. There's a lot that goes into that, which makes the proceeding hard, right? Abandonment: maybe you withdraw from a patient without providing notice. That's a contract as well. When a patient is seeing a provider, they have a contract with that provider, and it doesn't have to be written. And then breach of contract: when someone fails to comply with the terms of the agreement. You also have class action lawsuits filed by a large group. Some of you might have gotten things in the mail. Maybe a bank had a class action lawsuit or something that you could sign up for a small reward. These happen all the time. It's when groups of people hold, usually businesses, accountable for things they should have done or didn't provide. And then public and criminal law: felony and misdemeanors. I know this is pretty common knowledge, but this can be on the federal and on the state side. You have a crime, you have a police investigation, Prosecuting attorney files, you have an indictment by a grand jury potentially, and then the defendant appears before the judge, and you go all the way through the pretrial motions, all the way to probation or suspended sentence, or the trial. Maybe there's a plea deal. Lots of different things in here. And then misdemeanor is a little bit different. Not guilty or guilty all the way to charge dismissed to guilty verdict and sentencing. A lot of different information in here that's going to be helpful for you as you think about the differences between a felony and a misdemeanor. Complexity, right? Felonies usually more complex cases and more damaging cases, or it's always most of the time, because different things, you can look at your state. For Washington, you have different laws. Some things reflect higher levels of felony and higher levels of misdemeanors, and you can take a look at that on the state website on the judicial branch. I think it's called RCWs, the laws in the state of Washington. All right, administrative law, regulations set by government agencies, license and supervisions of controlled substances is a big one for healthcare related issues. Health department regulations, regulations against homicide, euthanasia, assault and battery, regulations against fraud, and of course the IRS, who deals with tax regulation. So in the court system in the United States is state and federal. We've already mentioned that a few times. Each has specific responsibilities. Both courts have the power to hear a case, and it all depends on the type and location of the offense committed. The federal court includes the District Court of Appeals and U.S. Supreme Court, and the state also includes the District State Court of Appeals and State Supreme Court, because there's going to be a state Supreme Court in every state. It's set up similar to the federal side. Trial process often includes a grand jury of 12 to 23 private citizens that hear evidence and determine if there is merit, of course, for an indictment, and then it moves to trial court based on that. And oftentimes in the trial process, the person that has a charge against them, they might not even know that grand jury's meeting to discuss a charge until the charge is filed. It's pretty interesting. Not sure if I agree with that, but that happens quite often. And then the procedure, it's really interesting. There's litigation, there's a plaintiff and a defendant. Many of you have seen, on TV and such. And a lot of this is public knowledge, but just the trial process is very interesting to go through a trial, or if you sat on a jury before, it's very interesting as well. All right, settling in the court occurs when attorneys of both sides work out a settlement. Settlements often happen. The goal is sometimes to reach a settlement, so the cost is less, because attorneys' fees are not cheap unless the attorney is appointed by the state or the government. You can waive, both parties waive to give up their right to a jury trial, or you can start the trial, which is complex and takes a long time. Procedures, of course, during the procedure you have a closing argument and an appeal if you don't get of course, the decision that you want. Moving a little fast here. Here's a procedure of trial for civil law. If you're interested in taking a look at this, a lot of great information located here. And then summary judgment, of course. Request made by an attorney, and it takes place in a civil trial, and the judge asks to declare no need for trial, potentially. And the summary can result in a win for one side based on the pleadings. All right, subpoena. This is a really cool topic. You can be subpoenaed for information. It's a discovery process, right, in a deposition. So you can be subpoenaed if you have information related to the case, and the court orders you to appear and bring records, or you could be subpoenaed to actually discuss the case in front of a jury as well. Standard of proof. You have to have standard of proof, and there has to be a preponderance of evidence in a civil case to make it more credible and convincing. And then for a criminal case, the proof needs to be beyond a reasonable doubt. You have to actually have committed the crime or someone witnessed it. There shouldn't be doubt. If there's doubt related to the crime, of course, usually it's dismissed, or of course the defendant wins. But it's very complex, and there's a lot of things that go into that. Expert witnesses often happen in healthcare, right? A lot of times they pull in someone that's a healthcare expert to talk through things, and that's called a healthcare expert witness. It's a professional with special knowledge or experience. And then lastly, if you're testifying in court, you need to tell the truth, be professional. You can't memorize the testimony, basic things. This is a huge overview. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Make sure you watch the other supplemental videos as well. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks so much.